Hello, gorgeous. Today we are speaking about healing the sister wound. So then we can stop comparing ourselves to other women and stop putting other women down and start honoring this feeling of sisterhood, which is so healing for us women. My name is Jessica Angelari. I'm a feminine embodiment, intimacy and pleasure, love coach. And I want to speak to this idea of belonging as well, and the importance of feminine practices and women's circles, women coming together in sacred spaces, and what that actually means and why do we crave this so much. I am finding myself, when I hold ceremonies and circles, sisterhood circles, I find this is what women feel the most, like they're craving it the most, and they usually join my programs just for that. So what are we craving from them? What is it about these that women are desiring? The thing is, women were gathering for centuries ago with wise women, priestesses, medicine women, artists, doulas, shaman women. And they were all gathering together to share their medicine with other women who were in need of sacred spaces. And women were coming together as well in the red tent when they were bleeding and being held by the elders and being guided by priestesses, by women who carry this beautiful wisdom of the feminine within their selves. And this is not new for us. And that's probably why when we awaken to this feminine consciousness, which I'm finding that we are rising in this, the more we rise in this desire, the rise in the feminine consciousness, which brings this desire to connect further with our bodies, the more we desire to be around other women and share these experiences with them as well. So then we know we're not alone. The thing is, we haven't been doing this, and it's still something that we are craving, and this movement is still rising because something along the way has gotten in the way of us gathering and really recognizing the importance of women coming together, especially when they're bleeding or when they're entering their bleeding, when they're teenagers or when they're entering menopause, or even motherhood, where we're very disconnected. And the things that have gotten in the way are competition and comparing and jealousy and gossiping, this gossip, this need to know or to be around drama. And all of these unhealthy habits of the feminine, these are unhealthy habits. They've intervened. They've gotten in the way of our truth, and we've used these habits, or these habits have kind of taken over as a way to gain validation, as a way to seek love and approval from the external, because we haven't done that for ourselves. So that might mean you might get intimidated by other women and you don't know why. Maybe that has been your journey for a very long time or most of your life, or you find yourself comparing yourself to other women, and then you find yourself feeling anger or even shaming them. And we've all experienced this as well. We've all experienced being compared or being shamed or being put down. We've experienced this sister wound in some way or another. And the thing is, I have always experienced this, but I never heard about it. I thought I was always alone, which right there supports the idea that we require real, authentic, sacred spaces more than ever in order for us to feel this resonance and to heal together, and to know that we're not alone in a world that tries to tear us down. So what does sisterhood mean to you? Have you ever thought about that? Why is it so important for us women in our empowerment? And we all have our own definitions around this, around what that means. And that's usually based on our experiences and what we desire. I realized how much I was struggling with this idea of sisterhood and belonging with women in women's spaces until more recently in my life. And there was this really deep desire to belong. But when I look at my own stories and beliefs around this, I realize it was coming from as well a deep rooted fear of not being needed. And that's my story. And I went through different phases of belonging growing up. As a teenager, belonging in different social groups, I always had this deep sense of belonging because I felt like an outcast. And I struggled with this with most of my life, and mostly when I wasn't really reclaiming my own worth and knowing who I was. And I was feeling this wound, this feeling of not knowing where I was belonging, because I was comparing myself with other women who I felt had it more altogether, or who were more beautiful than me, or who were more successful than me and getting attention from boys, from men. And I wasn't blonde enough, or I wasn't tall enough, and all of these self-imposing beliefs really created this idea that these were the ideas that create this sense of belonging, that I need to have or fit into these standards in order to belong. And if I don't, then I feel bad about myself, or I judge myself, and maybe even judge other women, shame other women. And that's how I felt like I was, then comparing myself. So my phases of where I didn't belong, a lot of it was around this idea of sisterhood, this desire to fit in with women. And I was always in this deep exploration for it with my friends, and it's how I claimed my identity as well. And I've had a lot of challenges around this idea of the sister wound in my life, this sisterhood in my life, something I don't often talk about. And I think it's why I feel so passionate about what I do today as well, and holding space for women now. I have two sisters, and I've always really been around women. I have always felt the most comfortable being around women. And ironically, this is actually probably where I've struggled the most, being around groups of women. And although I've enjoyed being in the company of women, I have always felt different. I have felt like an outcast with my own sisters. And there's been lots of jealousy and lots of holding on to anger and lots of competition. And through this, the comparing that's happened. And this is something I don't hold on to anymore. I'm talking about this was happening in my younger years. But this pain has lived through my body. It's lived through me, but I have come to make peace with it myself. And for so long, I carried this idea that it was my responsibility, especially in my family with my sisters, because I'm the oldest, that I always had to make it up to them. And I always had to put a face, a mask on. Little did I know that I was not standing in integrity of my own needs and feelings in these dynamics. I have been an outcast amongst women, like friends, and I've been gossiped about, and I've been slut shamed as well because of the way that I have dressed or the way that I express myself. And this used to really hurt me before. Of course it would. I remember my first experience being an outcast by women. Well, it was more girls. I was 12 or 13, and I was in this group of I was in a friendship group, and we were friends since primary school. And even now, speaking about this, as I bring that to my memory, I can still feel the memory in my belly. I can feel a bit of tightness there. And I remember one day I came to school, and there were 6 of them, if I can recall correctly. And yeah, they approached me and said, just straight out, they didn't want me to be part of their group anymore. Now, this sounds really silly now, but obviously it wasn't. It was important to me then. And it broke my heart. It shattered me into pieces. And I just didn't know why. There was no reason for any of this. And I remember when I asked them why, they had no real reason. And that was it. And I remember a few days later, I returned to school. I found the courage within me to go back, and I put a smile on my face and embarked on my journey of finding a new group of friends, which I'm really grateful for. And I realized actually from then how the courage that was within me, that was really carrying me forth with this difficult time, but also with this desire. And all these situations from that we experience from a really young age, they stay with us and they are embedded in our feminine psyche. And let me know if something similar has happened to you or it did happen to you. Over the years, I became angry, and I became really apprehensive and turned off when it came to getting close to women. I felt I had been hurt too many times, and I was done with being judged for my actions and for my words and for my motives, and I always felt that my intentions were pure, they were good. I mean, it doesn't mean I was perfect, but I never understood, because I wasn't doing this to them. I wasn't gossiping. I wasn't being hurtful. But I was allowing it. I was allowing that energy into my life. I was just, I suppose, putting up with more than what I deserved. And what I desired really was to be accepted and understood and not be judged. And through this anger, I began to turn to men. That was my coping mechanism. I began to confide in men as my support system, because I felt like, they got me, they just knew me. But in this, I was also playing a game. I can say that now when I reflect. I was not one of the boys, but I pretended to be for their attention and approval, and I could get it because I discovered that my charisma, my ability to flirt, was how I gained their attention and their desire for me. So to me, this was just another unhealthy outlet of my own wounded self, my own feminine expression, who wanted to be loved and was wanting that outside of me. I hadn't claimed that for myself yet, and I really just wanted to be adored. I wanted to belong. I wanted to feel loved. I mean, who doesn't, right? And this all changed for me, though, when I began to do my own deep inner work and began to do this work of self-love. And really, what does that mean? And anchoring into my body, finding the safety within me to resource and to to anchor into this feeling of comfort and soothing and nourishment. And through this, I return to the essence of me. And this isn't to say that I don't have challenges still. Of course I do. But I have brought my awareness to the things that come up. I'm aware if I'm being triggered. I'm aware of how that sits in my body. I'm aware of how the sensations move through my body and what is mine, what is not mine, when I'm being triggered, why am I being triggered? And I'm so grateful that I did go through all of these challenges, because now I understand how to not only hold space for myself, but also hold space for women today, for women to come together and feel safe, to be seen, to practice being seen. The jealousy, the competitiveness, the constant comparing, the leaking, the gossiping, the patronizing, all of it is real. And we all experience it one way or another, whether it's from our friends or our own sisters. But when we do this, it's usually when we are shaming or when we are comparing or when we're feeling triggered. It's usually because we haven't yet claimed something in ourselves. That's really what it is. And so we just project it. But when we start to do this work of reclaiming the feminine and reconnecting to our worth, and we do this through connecting with our body, through the wisdom of our womb, through reclaiming our power through our yoni, when we do this work, we then begin to accept other women, and we accept them, and we start to see them differently. We start to see them also having their own human experience, and we start to have empathy for them. And we start to feel this love and compassion, because we know how to do that for ourselves when we're feeling afraid or when we're feeling triggered. And this doesn't mean that we have to then just become friends and allow anyone into our life, but we bring compassion towards them, and we stop holding all of this anger, and we stop projecting all of our own insecurities onto other women. And then we stop comparing, we stop shaming them as well. And we stop getting caught up in the drama and the gossip. And we start celebrating them. We're all carrying our own generational pain, and we're bound to these chains that have lasted for centuries, of where women were turned against each other. Women were forced to turn against one another for survival. But we don't need to do that anymore. We don't need to do it. The thing is, we're not even aware of this. And so all of these generational old wounds, they sit in the body because we haven't yet connected with it. We haven't felt through it, and we haven't moved through it in a healthy way. And I know all of this because I've done the work, and I'm still doing it. We're always learning how to continue bettering ourselves. The thing is, if we are unaware of these ways, these habits that keep us stuck in these patterns of comparing ourselves to other women or shaming other women, we are not really getting to the root of what is in the way of really reclaiming our worth. The sister wounds are real and deep, and it is up to us as individuals to start moving through them. When you have a history of being judged and you have trauma with being around women, you hold on to this, you hold on to it in your body, like we do when we have been hurt by men, when we've gone through a breakup, or when we've been tied, we've been bound in these challenging toxic relationships. But we hold these patterns within us in a different way with women. And sometimes it's unconscious. This was very much true for me for years. My body would tense up, and that's the thing. Your body will remember. And it would tense up always around women's circles. It didn't look like it on the outside because I was really good at pretending and really good at, wearing a mask. But what helped me was being okay. Being okay with not fitting in, being okay and really accepting me. I didn't have to change myself. If everybody else is conforming into these standards or these ways that don't feel good for me, don't make me feel at ease, I don't have to change myself to be accepted. And this came from knowing me, knowing who I am. And also accepting and knowing that I don't have to feel at home in or every space that I go into. I don't have to force it. And knowing it's okay to want and crave this sense of belonging in women's spaces, whether it's with friendships or in women's circles as well. It's okay to want to crave it. And to also say, I'm going to feel nervous coming into this, and I'm going to be maybe messy, or I might not know what I'm going to say, or have these fears of what if I'm judged. It's okay to have that. So I'm letting go of what it means to be around women. And this is what we can do. I'm going to embrace my imperfections, and then because there's no right or wrong way to be. And I feel like that's what stops us from really being our authentic selves as well when we're around other women, that we have to put on a mask because we have been hurt. And because we've been hurt, we've been disconnected more from who we are. So then we feel we have to put on a show, and that really disconnects us from our truth. And like I said, I feel really passionate about creating these spaces for women so they can hopefully feel safe and acknowledged, and also not feel that pressure, or not feel like that fear, that anxiousness that overcomes them from sharing and being messy. I want women to show that side of themselves, to be vulnerable, to be imperfect. And that's something that's missing. I held space for children for over a decade, and I saw this idea of tearing other girls down from, this young age, as young as 5. And it was here I realized that I was playing something bigger in this world. And that's what guided me into working with women, which I feel, is my calling. So my journey with facilitating sisterhood really began when I was a teacher. I desired to share this love amongst girl groups. And then I moved on to facilitating spaces in retreats using sensual movement, sensual dance. And here I realized it wasn't just dance that I was offering. I was amazed at what was coming to life when women were coming together. It wasn't just dance. It was this sacredness. It was this ability for women to tap into their sensuality and erotica, their erotic wild self, whilst feeling safe in groups, whilst feeling like, hey, I can feel like myself. And this is what I was bringing into these spaces. What was happening in these groups was that women started to talk with me about their desires and their passions, and how dancing made them feel alive. This was a few years ago when I was in Tulum, and they were speaking to me about the challenges that they felt with feeling alive and with connecting with their body. And they began to share because they knew that they could. They felt that they could talk and share their voice as well with other women. And it gave other women permission for them to also talk and share. And this is what I find in my programs. This is why I have created my program as a group, so women can come together and we resonate, we feel the resonance from one another's sharings, and we learn and we remember ourselves, and we continue rising and meeting with these deeper parts of ourselves that we love through one another, because we become this projection of one another. And I know how important these spaces are for each other. I feel like this safety, this sacredness, this comfort is such a missing link, because we, like I said, we are afraid to show up as our authentic selves, to be vulnerable, to share about our hurts and our pains, and not have to also show up in a way that's perfect. We want to show up vulnerable. We want to show up messy. We want to show up crying and happy and embracing all the aspects that a woman is. We desire this. And the thing is, I think a lot of women don't realize how healing, medicinal these spaces are when women do come together and share this. This is where a lot of my healing has actually happened, through the work of, through being in circles, not so much just a circle, but being in sacred groups, sacred circles. Because circles, women's circles, are not always the safest places to be. I remember my first circle that I attended, I was in Mexico. I remember entering and I felt terrified, and there was a lot of sharing that was happening, which was beautiful, but I felt like that there was that missing link of that love, that sacredness. And because of that, I felt afraid to share. And yes, this was also because I hadn't claimed in myself that feeling of worthiness, but I also didn't want to. I also didn't want to share because it felt traumatizing. And that's the thing. When you know your energy, you also know when it feels good for you to share. I felt like in these circles, I went to a couple, like we all have to be this one type of person, and we all have to be from a certain background or identity to fit into these circles. And we see it a lot as well, especially in this movement of the feminine at the moment, that we have to look a certain part, we have to look a certain way. And if we don't, then we don't deserve to be there, or we don't deserve to have this type of healing. I found in these spaces with women, whether it was social or in these intentional sacred spaces, when it was time to really go deep about the truth of things, it's like something was brushed over with another. You know, there was this idea of bring a positive light to it. But what we really need in our lives as women is a very intimate, personal experience of someone being there for you, one, holding the space, who has been through challenges and knows how to hold space for all types of emotions. But for someone to be like, you know what, I'm here for you, for real. You know, really knowing the authentic you. I'm not here to fix you. I'm not here to cover that feeling up with a band-aid and just say, surrender. You know, I'm here to hold space for you. I'm here to celebrate, yes, the positive, high vibe feelings, but I'm also here to support, your shadows. All of you is welcome. And I desire, and that's what I love creating space for, and seeing women feel so deeply held and supported in this. Because I have felt the irregulated nervous system happening within me when I have been in these spaces, and it doesn't feel good. Our outcomes are better as women when we are more connected in an authentic way. And that's why sacred spaces are vital. That's how we connect as women. Women, the feminine is about relationships. And we connect through sharing, we connect through speaking. Men connect on a different level. They connect through sharing in a physical way, through sharing things that interest them. We share with our feelings and emotions. And I think that's beautiful. And I learned this a lot from when I was working with children, when I would observe children, and I could see naturally how girls would gather and share and speak and connect in that way and be emotional. And that's how we bond. But this gets lost very easily, very quickly, as soon as we realize that we can manipulate, or that we can put others down, or when we learn that being emotional is wrong, or even weak, or being feminine is weak. And so we manipulate or shame or put women down, or we act a certain way. We take on a mask that isn't authentic to our heart in a way to be seen and to be popular. So we've been brainwashed and perpetuated by media of what a woman should look like. And so we're fed into this idea of a woman, the false woman. And if we are not, we must then be a failure. But when we are really together in the better and the less thans, and sharing with no judgment, and really seeing another woman when she's feeling emotional, she's feeling her heart, she doesn't know why she's crying, she's just feeling it, we thrive more, we heal. And that's the thing I have found myself when I've been sharing in these sacred spaces with women, or women have come into my spaces. They get very emotional and they don't know why. And there's no need to know why. They're just feeling this resonance of love with one another. And we move away from the competition, because we have been divided as women through competition, through comparing. And this is generational as well. It reaches back hundreds of years ago, like I said, where women were forced to turn against each other to save themselves. And I speak about this as well in Feminine Remembrance, Come Home to Yourself. We actually start, the first module is breaking the feminine paradigm. And in there, I do speak about the her story and how that has affected us and how that plays and lives through our body. So we are really called, and we really need to create these sacred safe spaces for women to come together. And that's my mission here, where women can really come and feel safe and heal and discover and reconnect and remember who they are in this resonance of love with other women, and be seen by them, practice being seen in a way that's not harmful and where there is no judgment. That's my mission, to help women recognize how much can be done when we're not acting from this state of needing to compare ourselves to make us feel validated, or where we can go into these spaces where our nervous system is regulated, where we feel comfortable just to be ourselves, I want to get to a place where we don't need these circles for women to come together to heal and to feel safe. We just know who we are in all of our enoughness, in our relationship with ourselves, in acknowledging our own unique journey. And then with that, we then don't need to put other women down. We don't need to compete with them. We don't need to slut shame them. We are so anchored in our worth that we know we are here in our enoughness, and therefore we see other women in their enoughness. Once we listen to our own flow, our own inner rhythms, and how we are always changing, just like the moon, we then begin to honor this changing nature in other women also. So then we don't put another woman down when she changes her mind. We don't feel we need to put her down for her ups and downs and for her vulnerabilities. We also don't feel like we need to always be there to fix and we need to compete. And having these circles where we can be held can be still, where we can be still together and feel really safe. It's about being in spaces to allow this relaxation in the body. We want to create spaces where we can actually go deeper together and be real together and not pretend and brush things under the rug, or then feel shamed or feel judged for even feeling such things. We want to create a real space of intimacy where we can feel safe to be vulnerable and even rock the boat and say things that might be outrageous or not what everybody expects us to say or to think. We want to move away from being in groups where it's very much about fitting in and all being the same. Instead, we want to move into spaces where we can be real and authentic. And in this, we are seen in that, and we allow for difference to be shown. And that's also a shadow side of these identity groups. This is what happens. We don't allow for difference. We all have to dress the same. We all have to look the same. We all have to speak the same. And I find these spaces that doesn't allow for difference really creates this disconnection. When we're disconnected from our intuition, from our heart, from our body, we become hijacked with fear. And we feel like the fear then overtakes, and then we feel like we can't say the wrong thing because how will that sound? So it's important to check in. Where am I creating and seeking safety? And observe the space and energy as well. These sisterhood circles are craved, this crave for community, but then it's also really feared at the same time. And like I said, it could be unconscious. We fear it because of this divide that we feel. Like I was saying, we have to fit into these boxes in order to be part of the community, to be part of the space. So for a lot of us, it can make us freak out at the idea of being in this room as well of women. It can bring up a lot. There is this fear. And also, there's this fear of, if I go into this space, it means I also have to let go of this part of myself to fit in, or I have to put on a mask to be seen as cool and loving and fun. And then there's the fear of intimacy as well. What might come up if I'm vulnerable? Will I be shamed? Will I be judged? Will she look at me differently? Will someone think that I'm not worthy enough of being here? And this is pretty much what I have experienced in the past, which is why I really feel passionate about holding these spaces, for women, which I do in Feminine Remembrance, Come Home to Yourself. I feared this judgment and this intimacy because of what I had gone through with my own sisters as well. And this, like I said, is very deeply embedded in our psyche. But I have moved through this, and it's only because I've unlayered myself in the space of other women that I have really come to see that I can feel safe with other women as well. And then I don't have to feel hesitant in these spaces. So let's take the focus away from being in these spaces because we are craving to belong, and that it gives you a sense of identity. And instead, I invite you to move into them with curiosity, with inquiry, and asking yourself, what is it that I'm really desiring? What am I wanting from these spaces? Do you want to feel nourished? Do you want to be in space where you don't feel judged? Do you want to feel that intimacy? Do you want to heal the sister wounds? This also takes the embrace of honoring our own feminine essence, our true, authentic essence of the feminine, which is messy. We have to practice embracing this. Practice being okay with saying the wrong things and saying the wrong things in the company of other women. Of course, we can do this in these sacred spaces. To be okay with going from high to low, being okay being there, and also not knowing what to say as well. It's just practicing and knowing how to hold yourself with everything with reverence and your own love. And when we do this, we honor this in another sister, and we see her and we feel her when she's feeling messy and when she doesn't know what's going on and when she doesn't have all the answers. We just feel her. So we require communities that is less about being a certain way and instead really melting into nourishment, nurturance, the love, this feeling of being held. This is how women have thrived in ancient cultures, by being in spaces with women. This is how we know we are not alone in this journey of awakening. And we also realize, wow, I'm not the only one feeling like this. We need each other to grow, to flourish, to glow together. This is how we grow, through our resonance, through the realness and messiness. So let's speak to the realness of humans. Remember, we are all here learning and walking this path of opening to our own truths together. And we can do this together. We don't have to do it alone. We all are here with our own voice, our own spark of beauty, our own temple body, our own expression, our own pains and sadness. But at the core, we are all women feeling, moving, expanding in this world that does not support the feminine, but we can rise together. And when we know that we can rise together, we stop with the comparing, because we realize how much beauty we bring to spaces and to the world, and how much more beauty we bring and love we bring when we are rising together. So, sister, let me hold your hand in this circle of love. Join me in Feminine Remembrance. Come home to yourself, the 10-week group immersion where we do come together and explore so many aspects of our abyss, our inner abyss, our bliss, our happiness, our sensuality, our sexuality, as well as all the shadow parts of us that have really kept us small. Here we remember, and we remember together. In Feminine Remembrance, you will be given the tools to connect with pleasure and sensuality and love. And it's also about reuniting in this love together, in this power together, this power as woman. When we hold hands together, we remember And just like the flowers and the wild plants, they all move and grow and thrive together. And in that, there's always room and space for another, which is you. And in this space, there's no competition. We also come here growing in it with our own wildness, in this wild garden with our own scent, our own voice. And in this acceptance and knowing of our own wildness, our erotic aliveness, we come together and we can thrive more when we go on this journey together. Okay, my loves, let me know what has been your experience of feeling the sister wound. Have you felt the shame? Have you felt the competition? Have you been comparing with other women? And if you have, it's okay, but you're here to change that, and I'm here to hold your hand in that. I am Jessica Angelari. Thank you so much for being here. All my love to you. Mwah.